You are now listening to Arrowhead Pride Radio, your one-stop shop for all things Kansas City Chiefs. Here's your host, Jack Johnson, and the editor-in-chief of Arrowhead Pride, Pete Sweeney.
That's right. It's another edition of Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. As you heard it, that's Pete Sweeney, and Kyle Collier is producing this thing.
Yeah, Arrowhead Pride Radio, of course, brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage, where their one and only priority is putting people first. Check them out at hfmkc.com.
Well, Pete, I got to be honest with you. With about 5 seconds to go in that game on Sunday, I gave the Chiefs virtually a 0% chance of winning that football game. I was not high on them blocking the field goal. I was not high on Will Lutz pulling it, pushing it, whatever you want to call it, hooking it.
Did you do anything special? Did you cross your fingers, take your shirt off?
I did not. In fact, we were right here in the studio gearing up for postgame, and Dylan Michaels was down the hall. Kyle right there was down the hall. We were all preparing for what to talk about, what to open the show with, which would have been the Chiefs' first loss of the season. But lo and behold, Leo Chanel is the one that gets through, along with a lot of other Chiefs. But he just pounds the ball back down into the pavement. No good, 9-0. Your thoughts from that wild finish at Arrowhead Stadium on Sunday?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. And I think when you have a season like this where you're undefeated for this long, right? I think people have started to get a little bit more comfortable than, say, 4-0 or 5-0 with the idea, like, this is possible. And I think, look, you get out of there, and it's a division game, and you're 8-1, life's okay, right? Like, you're going to be able to bounce back, maybe address some concerns. I know there were plenty of them stemming from this game, but you could feel, I think, I was at the stadium, you could feel in the stadium that people were really disappointed that just this grand idea that maybe the Chiefs could pull off an undefeated season was now over. And I think the Broncos side of it was just so ready to get a victory.
Yeah.
Especially one where it wasn't like last year where they weren't really playing for anything and you just want to build toward the future and maybe a win against Kansas City will do that. They were able to get one last year and it kind of felt like the best part of their season. This is a Broncos team that could have won that game, knocked off the Chiefs, felt really good about themselves, put 2 games worth of cushion in between the wins and the losses, and you were right there. I mean, it was over. That more times than not, if you watch enough NFL, and even if the Chiefs aren't playing, I'm sure you're watching Red Zone, that's a witching hour. This game is changing moment where it's over, right? They got the first down, you're going to lose. And kudos to the Chiefs for just like never giving up. And I know it's been talked about a lot, but it's worth reiterating. This wasn't a fluke play where the kicker got iced and Denver's looking for a new kicker next week. It was a designed weakness that the Chiefs exploited to go and block this kick. And I've said this in a few places, so apologies out there if you've heard me say this already. But I brought up a couple moments at Arrowhead since I've been covering him in 2014 where it just felt like I was in utter shock. And I can only compare it to, again, there have been bigger games, but these moments. 16 when Alex won in week 1, barrels
Chargers.
in overtime. Later 16 where rookie Tyreek Hill is back for a punt. There's a penalty against the Raiders. They're wearing those stupid color rush jerseys, and the crowd is chanting his name, probably a bit inebriated, and he drives 78 yards for a punt return touchdown. Have to mention 13 seconds, just so improbable, where you just couldn't believe what you were seeing. And then this, truly, it's up there with those moments for me where you just felt like something completely different was going to happen, and the Chiefs end up victorious, and it really puts the Broncos in like a precarious position to make the playoffs, and of course keeps the Chiefs' undefeated season alive.
I'm really glad that you brought up the meaningfulness of this game for Denver. Because Denver was not a 2-6 football team. Right. In the past years, I wouldn't even say they had a team that was built for the future. Their quarterback was either Russell Wilson or it was Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater. This felt different because it's Bo Nix, a rookie quarterback. They'd split with you the year before. This one's at Arrowhead, a place they hadn't won since 2015 when Peyton Manning was the quarterback, and it's all lined up for you to win. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say the Chiefs blocking that field goal was the only way that kick was going to miss, because Will Lutz was just nails inside of 40 yards and really has been the majority of his career. And it's also a 35-yard field goal in the NFL.
Anyone,
like in college,
any kicker should make this.
That's a chip shot. Even the Broncos broadcast was saying this is a chip shot, and they have no words for describing what had just happened. But you go off of what happened to Denver last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago now. They get smoked by Baltimore. So they have that feeling of, man, maybe we can't compete with some of these top teams, right? They just showed us that, we'd beaten up on some bad football teams, but Baltimore, a top team in the AFC, just dog-walked us, basically, and beat us by 31. And then this was that chance to go, no, we actually can hang with not only the top team or one of the top teams in the conference, the top team in the conference. And to lose like that, to go from what could have been 6-4 to now 500, and you're scrapping again, I can't imagine the heartache. And it's probably heartache that they're still feeling today, Wednesday night, 4 days or so after the game.
You saw Sean Payton's face after the game, just miserable. And then he even went as far and, Sean Payton is like a little bit more forward than the average head coach, like certainly Andy Reid. In the press conference, he was like, this stinks, and this is going to take a while to get over. Like, it was that type of game and game-changing moment, and it had a playoff feel. I mean, I know you were here and getting ready for the post game. I mean, it just felt like this is a big moment in the season. And certainly if the Chiefs, and we're talking about a lot of games still, were to get to 14-0, 15-0, hell, if they get to 16-0, the Broncos are standing right there again. And, kudos to the Broncos for putting themselves in a position to win this game. According to the Next Gen stats, I think their pressure rate of Patrick Mahomes was 40%. He hasn't faced that type of pressure since week 8 of last year against the Broncos. Like, this is still a team that I think from a defensive standpoint can be a thorn to the Chiefs. And you know that from the division and what the AFC West usually brings to the table. And I'm intrigued. I'm ready. When's the last time I've said this? Like, I'm ready for Chiefs Broncos Part 2. I mean, it wasn't this flashy offensive game that maybe you'll see this week. I know we're going to talk about Chiefs Bills, but it was one of those football games where it was like gritty. It was tough. You really had to earn it, and you knew that it would be one of the bounces of the ball that determined it. For a second, it seemed like that bounce was the bounce of the ball out of bounds to give the Broncos the ball on the 40, and then it ended up being the blocked kick. So what a game, what a moment. And now the Chiefs turn their attention to perhaps their greatest threat in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast on Sunday. Chiefs and Bills. Right now it kind of feels like the battle for the 1 seed. But before we do dive into some Chiefs and Bills and get to our guy Ron Cobb, lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride, I feel like the other talking point from this game, aside from the blocked field goal, was the blocking from the left tackle position, which just wasn't much in this game. Wanya Morris, I think it was a bone bruise that Andy Reid said he was dealing with. He was on the bike, right, trying to get ready, but Kingsley Suamataia goes back in, and I guess, is it too harsh to say, because I am curious, I'm not trying to pile on a 21-year-old rookie that's being thrust into the situation, but is it too harsh to say right now that he just simply can't go back out there in a meaningful game?
Well, I think certainly like this week and maybe even the next games, plural, to follow. I mean, I think they need to hit the reset button on him a bit and let him take a step back and just get some comfort back in and confidence, like in his just basic technique of what it takes to be an offensive lineman. I don't think this is necessarily the last chapter of Suamataia and he's suddenly going to be out of the league. The Chiefs took him because they liked his traits. And you just think about his road. I mentioned this a little bit earlier on Soren's show. Like, rookie in the NFL, you have these flying bullets around you. You do earn the starting position out of camp. If you remember, Wanye never really had an opportunity to win the job because he was injured, off and on with injuries in camp. So it just ends up being Kingsley Suamataia. Granted, when both of these players were healthy in training camp, Kingsley was taking all the reps. And so they really felt he was ready. Starts the beginning of the season, and then very clearly it becomes noticeable that he's not going to be able to hold that position. He's not ready. So the Chiefs dial him back. And, you think about the scenario that you end up with there and talking to some folks with the team, and you find out, okay, well, now he is at practice, but it's scout team reps, which aren't the real same reps as, what would be the starting team. So suddenly you go from 6-7 weeks of scout team to not only in an NFL game, not in one that's close, but one against one of the better defensive fronts in the NFL. And he didn't have a chance. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And so kudos to Wanye for fighting through injury. I think, to me, this was a scenario where if Kingsley was playing okay, if Wanye was iffy, he probably doesn't go back in the game. And so it really was a question mark of could he push through injury to make sure that he gave the Chiefs at least some time on offense. And they were able to get it and shore it up and get the field goals that they needed in the second half. I think we gained a lot of respect for Denver this week. And, they're going to be what they are offensively. They got a rookie quarterback. He seems to get better every week, and I really feel like they finally have a passable quarterback for the first time since Peyton Manning left the NFL. That being said, this is a tough defense. And, I think it goes into one of my points that I'm going to make tonight about the Buffalo Bills, where it's like we're always just thinking of the Broncos as baby brother, and they stink, and they're just a nothing franchise. Where I think they've turned the page. I'm not saying they're going to threaten the Chiefs for the AFC West anytime soon. They're not close to that yet to me. But they are a potential playoff team. And so I think that's just worth remembering in these scenarios. But just getting back to left tackle, I think the plan moving forward, and I said this with Seren too, I think the plan moving forward will be Wanye to be the starter so long as he's healthy. And then if it comes to it, and Wanye gets injured, you kick Joe Thuney out to the left, and maybe a Mike Caliendo comes in at left guard, and you just roll with that until you figure it out the next week. I don't see him entering a game anytime soon.
See, that's what I thought would be interesting with this left tackle spot, because when we talked about this earlier in the week, I brought up the idea of if an injury happens mid-game again, right? Mm-hmm. If Wanye Morris has the bone bruise and then it flares up again against Buffalo, you do that switch of Joe Thuney to left tackle, Mike Caliendo to left guard, because you want to at least feel somewhat comfortable at left tackle. Right now, Kingsley Suamataia would be a liability at left tackle. But would that be the plan moving forward, where it's, hey, if Wanye Morris has an injury that holds him out for 4 to 5 weeks, is it Thuney at left tackle and Caliendo or left guard? Or do you have to say, all right, it's maybe time for a phone call to somebody like Donovan Smith?
I think for the foreseeable future, that will be the plan. Right. I think right now, when you think about the Chiefs and just how close they are to this cap, can only do so much, right? They are, they're up against it. And so, you think about maybe later in the season if they were to need like a Donovan Smith. I know that people have mentioned David Bakhtiari. There's also a lot of practice squads out there. Every team has a 16-man practice squad. Who knows if the Chiefs could pluck. And maybe it isn't necessarily a left tackle. Maybe it's the plan we're talking about where it is Thuney at left tackle, who has proven he can do it in a pinch. And then you bring in a left guard to sort of back up Caliendo. You have some options that are on the 53-man roster in a name Ethan Driscoll, undrafted free agent. You have Lucas Niang waiting around. So there are options without necessarily having to go outside the organization or even sign a player that right now will be on the quote-unquote street, where you maybe dip into the other NFL cities where these guys are at least getting work on a day-to-day basis. But right now, I think that is the A-B plan. Wanye Morris, if he were to get hurt, I think you would see Thuney in there with, a Caliendo sliding into the left guard position.
Also, to continue on that point about Denver, I think what is interesting about them being a threat to the Chiefs, maybe moving forward more so than the Chargers or more so than the Raiders, is it crazy to say that they're the only rival in this division of the Chiefs that have a home field advantage? Like the Chargers do not. Mm-hmm. The Raiders seemingly do not when they play the Chiefs. Like when the Chiefs go to Mile High, there's a lot of Denver fans there, and it's hard to play with the altitude.
I'll tell you right now, I'm ready for it. I think what a game it would be. I'm getting ahead of myself. Whatever. We're just
hypotheticals
we're
here.
We're shooting the S here.
It's fun.
But imagine if it's 16-0 versus like a 9-7. Yep. And the Broncos need to win to get into the postseason, and the Chiefs decide, you know what, we've clinched, but how often do you get to be 17-0 for the for the first time in NFL history? And that is a big that's the biggest Chiefs Broncos game, and as long as you can like really remember. And I who knows, right? I mean, I guess the Chiefs could lose this weekend. Hell, they're underdogs, but at the same time, I think, and I know that this has been enjoyable for everyone out there, like the Broncos sucking ass. I think the AFC West and the NFL is better when the Chiefs and Broncos each have a chance to win the football game. And I think this is the first game that you could really say like that rivalry is back. Now, I agree with the notion like a team has to consistently win a little bit more until you can call it a rivalry. I agree with all that. But Denver is no longer, we're going to their stick house and we're just going to blow it down. Like this would be a legitimate game, and I'm just eager to see how the rest of the season plays out for them. The division as a whole is getting better. I think we thought the Raiders might take a jump with Antonio Pierce. They really haven't. But the other two teams, the Broncos and the Chargers, right now would be in the postseason. And what else can you say about a division that has been pretty lopsided in favor of the Chiefs for a long time, that right now potentially 3 of the 4 teams would make the postseason?
Yeah, it's certainly a lot tougher moving forward throughout the rest of 2024. Quick little bullet points here before we talk with Ron Kopp. The injury news from today. Juju Smith-Schuster appears like he's going to go.
Yep.
So I got to tip my cap to you when you were talking about Juju Smith-Schuster. Seems like the timeline would be to return to Buffalo, but with Isaiah Pacheco and Charles Omenihu activated off the IR, but not really hopeful they're going to play in this game.
Yeah, we talked about it on this show each week. Like, it always seemed like the plan to me was to try to get him ready for Buffalo. Take him off his feet. This is the toughest game that were among the 4. They didn't put him on IR, so you thought that there was a chance, and here he is at practice today. He was a limited participant, and so we'd like to see a full Friday, I think, for Juju, but from everything that the organization is saying, that they think that this will be the week for his return. And unfortunate here. I know that everyone is eager to see Isaiah Pacheco and, of course, Charles Omenihu, but I don't think there's a 1% chance they play in this game. This is the Chiefs' MO. They give you a week to ease back in, and then maybe next week or maybe even the week after, just considering the opponents. We've talked about it. The Chiefs don't downplay their opponents, but I wouldn't be rushing anyone back against the Carolina Panthers.
All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk with our guy, Ron Kopp, lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride. You're listening to Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
While you're sleeping after the game, Arrowhead Pride's lead analyst Ron Kopp is in the lab. Now he joins Arrowhead Pride Radio.
Welcome back into Arrowhead Pride Radio, which is brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney. Kyle Collier back there producing this thing. We hop on the phone lines as we do every time for our second segment on Arrowhead Pride Radio and talk with lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride, Ron Kopp. Ron, what was your confidence level when Will Lutz went out for the game-winning 35-yard field goal?
Well, I'll say it like this: I was as mad as I've been all year. I was just upset. I was annoyed. I can't believe the Broncos. Denver's going to be the one to end the streak. Just waiting for that kick to go in. So yeah, not a lot of confidence there. But shout out Leo Chenal, man. I tweeted out he might have got a hernia, a sports hernia, stretching out that hard to get that block. So shout out Leo Chenal putting his body on the line to get that.
Now, I know that we have talked a lot about this left tackle position, but I feel like if that kick went in, the focus all week long is going to be on that left tackle position. So I want to pose this hypothetical for you. If that bone bruise really starts to linger with Wanya Morris and he can't go for a couple of weeks, what's your move as Brett Veach?
I would do what Jeff Allen, former Chiefs offensive lineman, kind of hinted at on Twitter, maybe pondered, and Donovan Smith, last year's left tackle, kind of replied, with a ambiguous gift, not much to know from that. But all that to say is we learned Sunday that, hey, the Broncos do have a really strong pass rush. Nick Bonito is an upcoming, one of the premier young speed rushers in the NFL, similar kind of style as Trey Hendrickson that gave Kingsley trouble the first time. But I think we learned Sunday that as much as possible, that this really needs to be a redshirt year for Kingsley. If the Chiefs are going for this three-peat, trying to win every one of these games, you just saw that there was just too many turnstile-like plays where, and Caleb James, a great film analyst for the site, really broke it down well. But, he just is not, not even just getting his hands on guys, not being able to even, just get him even, Mahomes a little bit of chance to maybe work his way out of it, some of those plays. And that becomes, unplayable, unfortunately, something that we maybe, Kingsley's a young guy, so you had to account for it going in, but they were confident in him as a week one starter.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to think about that as Wanya's injury really did impact in the training camp, and they just thought, maybe that really did impact it a lot. But all that to say is if I'm Brett Veach, I'm really thinking about, who I can, maybe someone who's been working out, someone, maybe who didn't want to play the whole season, find the Mike Pennell of the offensive line, the mercenary type, and maybe just have an emergency, break in case of emergency type of situation.
We're talking with Ron Kopp, the lead analyst over at Arrowhead Pride, and I agree, Ron. I think right now Kingsley cannot be in the lineup, but I want to remind people, like, the road isn't over for Kingsley, right?
Right.
We didn't see it his first year, and this was a different draft pick, but I like to bring up Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, the doctor, who had the redshirt year and ended up being a pretty good starter inside for the Chiefs. And who knows, maybe Kingsley slides in, and it's a different story in years to come. So the book isn't over for Kingsley, but right now there is a certain grand pause. I want to keep it with the offense, Ron, and talk about the Denver Broncos and just how good of a defense they actually are. And I think that's worth keeping in mind as maybe we're facing one of the better defenses in the league, and even as early as Sunday, it'll open up. I mean, I think we, at a certain point, don't you agree, have to give the Denver Broncos some credit?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's why I wanted to point out Bonito, a very underrated name in the NFL. He was a second-round pick a couple years ago, but he had that kind of speed rush, that excitement that people saw, and it's coming together. I mean, he had 6.5 sacks going into the game, led the Broncos defense in sacks. But it's not just him. Zach Allen he's actually the only defensive tackle besides Chris Jones, or excuse me, I should say the only defensive tackle above Chris Jones in pressures this year. He is kind of more of a DN, but on pass rush downs, he is inside. And then you have other guys like John Franklin Myers, man. That's a really good player that the Jets have had, kind of underrated in their defense the last few years. He has come into that Denver pass rush, so it's worth noting, and that's where. Week 2 after the Trey Hendrickson debacle, it was worth kind of maybe saying, look, Trey Hendrickson's one of the best there is, and Kingsley's second game of his entire career, as young as he is, maybe you give him a little leeway. This could be a similar situation where, man, it was just a really tough, rep or game for him to be, trusted, especially obviously because he's not, expected to start. But all that to say, the Broncos defense is definitely strong up front. I think you saw them, find ways to exploit the coverage, and Mahomes just missed a few of those. I think it's worth noting, too, that as much as Denver fans want to point to an illegal contact in the second quarter or just, maybe some other things, Mahomes makes a few more throws, like the deep one to Worthy and the last one to Kelsey, as he pointed out today in his press conference. Game's probably, a lot more comfortable of a Chiefs victory. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's worth pointing out. And I want to turn the page now to this week and the idea that finally some of these Chiefs injured players are back in the mix. We won't see Pacheco, and on the defensive side, we won't see Omenihu, but it does trend and it does seem that we're going to get Juju Smith-Schuster back for the Chiefs this week. Just in your mind, what does that do for the offense as a whole?
Well, the Bills' defense is definitely one you want to attack with just kind of those just chipping away completions, maybe, where maybe they aren't going to maybe give you the deep shots that they've had and Mahomes has missed, unfortunately, but they've gotten a few opportunities, and I think the Bills' defense does a really good job. Taylor Rapp is one of their safeties, a veteran. They do a pretty good job of staying over the top, forcing passes to be, in the middle of the field, short passes. But the Chiefs have, the players, especially like a Juju, where he can fit into zones. D-Hop's the same way. That's what they're going to have to do. I think it's a Kelsey, Juju, D-Hop game. If all three of them can get on the field at the same time, I think they're all very good at finding those windows in zone. And that's what the Bills are going to attack you with. They don't want to man up as much as you see other teams do. And so, yeah, this may be a game where Kelsey gets, we saw that Buccaneers game. It might be a similar one as that, where you're getting chipping away at Kelsey over the middle. But Juju's a huge part of that. So I think it's a crucial thing. You can have Juju play that slot position, getting playing opposite Kelsey, and then D-Hop can play more on the outside and actually maybe be a ball winner when you really need it.
Yeah.
I think it really gives you more flexibility as a pass offense for sure.
We're talking with Ron Kopp, lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride. Ron, I want to talk about this defense a little bit in stacking up against Buffalo. It's, of course, still a very prolific offense that Josh Allen operates. What should be Steve Spagnuolo's plan going into this one? Is it trying to maybe hide the number 2 cornerback out there, Najee Johnson or Joshua Williams, or is it trying to force Josh Allen out of the pocket, keep him in the pocket? How do you see this game going for Spags?
Yeah, if Jalen Watson was still around, man, I have so much confidence to just say, trust your coverage defenders, trust your guys, and just man them up, blitz, kind of just heat up Josh a little bit, try to force him to make maybe a bad decision, a rush decision. Obviously you can't do that too much with Josh, as it is, but I think I just trust, everyone that much. But you mentioned it, man. I think Najee Johnson, I think he showed some good things. He still hasn't played that much. He's been injured and everything. But I do think he can be a hole in the defense. And, the Bills are without Keon Coleman. That's a big deal. The rookie receiver that definitely has played better and better as the season went on. But Amari Cooper could still be in the mix. He was limited in practice. And, he's someone that, if Trent McDuffie goes inside against Khalil Shakur, a very, productive receiver, one of the highest catch rates in the NFL this year, someone that definitely gets open for Josh in the quick, to intermediate. And that's something Trent McDuffie, I think he's a good matchup for him. If Cooper is healthy, though, he's going to take advantage of who's on the outside. And so I do think the Chiefs, maybe should, maybe not, heat him up as much, try to force him to dink and dunk like I kind of mentioned on the other side of the ball. The Bills do a lot with their defense. Try to make him dink and dunk, try to, make a play on the ball, with zone coverage, and make him, kind of frustrated with trying to fit stuff in maybe, I wouldn't heat him up too much because I do think, they have the weapons. If Amari Cooper's healthy, especially, to kind of take advantage of the Chiefs, man, especially Dalton Kincaid, too. Good tight end, and we've seen the Chiefs struggle, man-covering tight ends.
Yeah, there are a couple statuses on that side to watch. Keon Coleman has been ruled out. We'll see on Cooper, who missed the last 2 games, and then, of course, Dalton Kincaid. He ended up leaving last game early, so they might be a little bit underhanded, similar to Kansas City. So we'll see. Ron, I want to ask you about the run game, and I think we've seen this year the Chiefs have been pretty good against the run, and I was caught a little bit off guard. I was a little surprised to see Denver not shy away from it. Like they went early and often. They got a new rookie that they wanted to feature. He ended up taking the lead role last week, and they ended up rushing for 4 yards a carry. Do you anticipate Buffalo trying to do the same, like Sean Payton tried to do, establishing that run game, and they certainly have the personnel to do it?
Yeah, I think you've seen the Bills' offense form into that a little more, trusting that James Cook, a dynamic running back like that, if you do chip away, he can maybe break one, and then setting up the play action off of that, because they are a team that uses that tight end, both tight ends, they use multiple tight ends, to pass the ball. So I absolutely think the Bills are going to test that, but this Chiefs defense has been very stout against the run. I think the Denver game, I do think it was definitely one of their lowest, weaker ones, but that's saying something, because, Denver still didn't really get too much going. Bo Nix was really, dicing it up a little bit. He deserves a lot of credit for kind of, converting third downs and keeping drives alive. And Josh Allen's going to be a much better version of that and a much more refined version of that. So that's really going to be the key to this game. And obviously it just makes it easier if you can stuff the run, if you can, do what they've been doing. They're still the number one team in first down runs, yards allowed. They're still the lowest allowed team. So still doing a really good thing, good things on first down against the run, and that sets up, tougher pass downs.
Yep.
But yeah, Josh is going to make it, a lot harder. Again, this Chiefs four-man pass rush, I should mention, man, they didn't do enough against Bo Nix. The blitz had to be the reason Nix got pressured at times.
Yeah.
They really does have to step up against Josh Allen, because, like I mentioned, blitzing is just going to, give him opportunities to make big plays.
Ron, I hate to do this in Week 11, but is this game going to decide the 1 seed when we look back on it?
That's a really good question, because I obviously, if the Chiefs win it, absolutely. But, man, the Bills, that's where it is a huge game for the Bills. They close it within one game because they have the tiebreaker. And you look at the Chiefs' schedule, there are still opportunities for teams like the Chargers to come into Arrowhead as a playoff, contender and try to get a win themselves in an important game. Or, Houston is getting healthier. They haven't looked that great. But, Nico Collins is coming back. They're going to be a healthier squad. The Steelers are, all of a sudden one of the better teams. Russell, a veteran quarterback, kind of leading, a defensive team. But all that to say, the Chiefs, this is an important game for both sides, because, if the Bills do get this one out like they have in the regular season before, they are in a good spot, because they're a really good team. They're at 2 losses, and they're hitting their stride a little bit too, where, they may go on a run and not lose too many games either. I know they have the Lions on the schedule, so I think the Niners as well. So it is huge, though. And so to answer your question, I almost want to say only if the Chiefs do. If the Bills do, I think the Chiefs still have a very, very strong chance, obviously, still having one game up, but Bills have a better shot.
All right, so last one for me, then we'll let you go. Does the undefeated streak stay alive on Sunday, or are the Bills finally going to be that team to put one loss in that loss column for Kansas City?
As much as I absolutely could see it happen, I'm not going to predict it, and I really do think this Chiefs team – I say that because, man, obviously, this has been a wild run and the undefeated thing. But this Chiefs team, I think, really enjoys kind of the history of what they're doing and the three-peat. I know they don't talk about it a lot, but I think part of that, too, is keeping this undefeated streak as long as they can go. And I think it gives them reason to get up for every game. Obviously, they didn't need more reason to get up for this game, but I think that's a big thing. And so I'm gonna ride them. Let's ride it till it falls off. And so I think Mahomes and Kelsey has a big game to get this done on Sunday.
All right, Ron. Well, appreciate your time as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys.
Man, if the Chiefs were able to beat Buffalo, those fans are going to be miserable.
Can you imagine if it's a controversial call at the end?
I hope it's a good, clean game.
I do, too. It has to be, or else social media is going to explode.
At a certain point, you just want to see a game where no one is talking about the officials at all.
I don't know if we're going to get to that point, because even against Denver, that was not even a highly officiated there weren't flags all over the field here. There was the one illegal contact play that everybody freaked out about, and that was pretty much it. But yet still, every game, as long as the Chiefs win, it's official related.
I think we're just such in the Chiefs bubble. Jack, you don't know about this about me. I love ball. I'm Mr. Ball. I love it. I watch it all the time. There's questionable calls in every game. I think
last Thursday night.
I think this year more than other years, just generally across the NFL, you are getting the moments in the game where you're like, is that the right call? And sometimes it's a non-call, sometimes it's a silly call. I just want to see one of these heavyweight fights. Chiefs are not. There's great games across the NFL every week where, man, we're just not talking about a replay or did they miss this? It would be nice to just get a clean game. I know we all want Kansas City to continue the undefeated streak, but it would just be nice to come out of a game and not have fans on social media one way or another being ticked off.
I don't know if I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe. It's getting hard to believe. Yes, which it shouldn't be.
I think this year is more than any other year, but probably because they're undefeated. Last year, they slipped up a couple of times. There were moments, probably more so toward the postseason. But right now, I think it's the same way it was with the Patriots. I think a lot of people just, when they would win a lot, well, that one missed call in the second quarter changed the outcome of that game.
There's always a lot of eyes on the Chiefs, undefeated or not now. And this game, for sure, quite obviously, everybody is going to have their eyes on. I believe it's actually on every TV in America this week. And so everybody will be watching this one. But I think when you add the undefeated aspect to it, it does even draw attention to, like, a Chiefs-Panthers next week. Like, let's say a weird scenario happens and maybe there's a mistake or two, and all of a sudden the Panthers ended up being up 14-3. Let's just say, not trying to put that bad juju
like
into
it was
the air.
Broncos game.
But yeah, like early in the game. Now it's a throwaway Panthers-Chiefs game, and maybe another week that might be surprising, but it's not like everybody in America is checking that score. That's all stemming from the undefeated streak.
I do think what's interesting about this game coming up on Sunday is it's certainly important. Everybody knows it's important because the Chiefs can all but lock up that number 1 seed and have home field through Arrowhead Stadium in the postseason. But when you've beaten Buffalo now, 3 times in the postseason, and beaten the Chiefs twice in the regular season, I'm speaking from a Buffalo perspective here, does a win on Sunday really take away the sting when you think about it?
Not completely.
It's a regular season game. And the Chiefs have gotten into this mode, though it's different because they're undefeated. Like, I think that first loss will definitely sting no matter who it is.
Yeah.
But when you are constantly competing for Super Bowls, you're winning them, you take on that Patriots mantra where it was, hey, you got us in November. Congratulations. We're worried about January.
I'll take it a step further. To get rid of that sting truly, I think the Bills would have to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs and then finish the job.
True.
Because we've seen it with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cincinnati beat the Chiefs in the AFC title game, disaster at Arrowhead, and they didn't finish the job. So that doesn't necessarily feel like they got the better of the Chiefs. And I mean, obviously the Chiefs have been wildly successful, but that year that same year I'm talking about, everyone is so pumped. Grim Reaper, just rip the hearts out of Buffalo. Then they end up losing, right? And so it just doesn't mean as much. So I think to truly get that stank off of you, you got to beat Kansas City in a playoff game. That's the first step. But you also have to finish the job.
Yeah, I could see it now where if Buffalo wins on Sunday, I mean, people will say the Chiefs this whole time were not really built like an undefeated team. This is the best team in the AFC, and all that noise and chatter can happen now.
It'll be a plunge down the power rankings. I mean, you're talking about fourth, third or fourth. Easily. This team's undefeated for 9 weeks. They lose one game. And
to a good team on the road.
Because the Bills will go ahead of them in these power rankings. The Lions will be ahead of them, so that's already 3. And I'm sure there'll be one talking head or another putting another team ahead of them, too. So you're looking at 4th or 5th. It's crazy. I mean, it's such a reactive sport, and that is part of why we love it, Jack, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can call it what it is on Sunday. This is the game of the year in the regular season. I don't know, unless that Broncos game, it's 4-17-0. You could call another game on this schedule the game of the year, but I think because of all the emotions, how Buffalo feels towards Kansas City, it's in Orchard Park. It's an 8-2 versus 9-0. Game of the year for anybody, right?
I agree, yeah, and to this point, for sure. But there's also scenarios like we just talked about it off air, and I'll bring it on air. Like Pittsburgh looks really good.
Absolutely.
You're talking about Pittsburgh and Kansas City on Christmas when nobody is working. That has a potential too later in the season, especially if the Chiefs were to get by Buffalo with a win.
Yeah, should be a blast on Christmas Day. Should absolutely be a blast on Sunday. 3:25 kick. Chiefs and Bills. Buffalo, a 2.5-point favorite at home. We'll take our second break. When we come back, we got Pete's 3 things to watch and some mailbag questions. You got any questions? Look for Pete's tweet out there or Arrowhead Pride, or use our text line at 913-912-4810. That's 913-912-4810. 4810. Mailbag questions coming up next on Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Enjoying the show so far? Now it's time to get you involved. Text in your comments or questions to 913-912-4810, and we'll read and talk about it right now.
Back here on Arrowhead Pride Radio, brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. I am your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney. And we got Caden Spruill producing alongside Kyle Collier as well. Packed house here at the studio. It's time now for Pete's three things to watch.
Right.
Big showdown in Orchard Park, Chiefs and Bills. Let's just dive right into it. And I think there are a couple of obvious points looking at this game. But the first one that we do want to talk about a little bit is special teams. And to be honest with you, against Denver, outside of the blocked kick, there were a few blunders there. There was the short kick that I think Matt Derrick told us on postgame that Harrison Butker said, hey, the call was to kick it out of the back of the end zone. I don't know how much I buy that, because how often does Harrison Butker mishit a ball like that so badly, really? And then even Matt Araiza, who's been so great, and again, if you want to count this a blunder, I'm not going to fault you. It's not really that bad of a blunder, but a couple of punts that rolled into the end zone. Didn't really come close either. It wasn't like there was anybody down there. Just not the greatest of punts. So the special teams wasn't great. Do you see that being a game-changing thing on Sunday.
Yeah, actually something, and this is a little nerdy of me, that I'm looking forward to tomorrow's media of Dave Tobe. A lot of times we'll come out of a game and it's hum-ho, and you see a field goal or two there. But tomorrow we get them, and there are a lot of things to address. Like, you talk about some of the punts, and certainly that sequence at the end where he goes from potentially, if they were trying to kick it in the quote-unquote landing zone, kind of a scapegoat for losing the game, to, wow, you coach up the best special teams in the league. You got, the tips and everything like that. We also had a field goal in this game that turned into a return, right? And it'd just be good to get his perspective on it. He's always so good with us when it comes to revealing what he's thinking, what he saw, what they're trying for this week. Never really giving away the game plan necessarily, but I know it's a nerdy part of the third phase of the game, but I'm eager to talk to Dave Tobe, and we will tomorrow. They put him in front of the media at about 11:45 on the dot usually, so that'll be fun.
Now, I want to talk about this Bills defense, comparing it to Denver's. Should we see this Chiefs offense struggle as much as they did against Denver, or is this should be an easier maybe time getting some chunk plays, running the football, because it was really hard to come by against Denver?
Yeah, the Bills always offer a really nice front, and so you don't want to take away anything from what Buffalo can do when it comes from a pressure standpoint. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on the left tackle position, but I brought this comparison up earlier today, and I wanted to share it here, where, and I alluded to it earlier, Jack, I think we have it in our heads that the Broncos are bad and the Bills are good. And the Chiefs just played this bad game against a bad team, and now what are they going to do against the good team? And I did some digging on some of these numbers from Pro Football Focus, and I know some people like it, some people don't. Regardless, they do their work and they grade accordingly. And I just thought this was interesting. When it comes to the Broncos, they rank 6th in defense, 5th in rush defense, and 9th in coverage in the NFL. That's pretty good. That if you can be in top 10 in all those categories, you got a pretty damn good defense. Now, you compare that to the Bills. The Bills are 15th in defense. That's 9 ranks lower. 26th in rush defense. That's 21 ranks lower. Think about Kareem Hunt. And then in the coverage, as the Broncos are 9th, the Bills are 22nd. So you're talking about 13 ranks lower. So of course, you got to see how these games play out. But I just think from a pure matchup standpoint, I think this week we're more likely to see that Chiefs offense that we were getting excited about leading up to the Broncos game in those 2 weeks than maybe we saw against the Broncos. I just think at a certain point, you got to remember to reverse it in your head. Like, teams can get better.
Yeah.
And the Broncos are a borderline playoff team with a really good defense this year. And so, again, not going to be a walk in the park, but I think from an offensive standpoint, naturally, things are more apt to open up for the Chiefs this week.
Now, you have somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster likely going to play in this game. But, with D-Hop, a guy who is the Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver, he's not going to have to worry about somebody like Pat Surtain following him around all game long.
Yeah, and if you notice that, and I noticed especially earlier in the game, and I wasn't necessarily tracking this the whole time, but Surtain was basically shadowing him. And that's a credit to Hopkins and what he was able to show in the first few weeks with Kansas City. And they wanted to make a point of it, Denver did, of taking him out of the game. And I think they did a good job. I mean, he was still able to get onto the stat sheet, but not in probably the capacity he was hoping to. And I just don't know from a coverage standpoint if they're going to be able to keep the top of the container on DeAndre Hopkins. And, like, you've seen it with the Chiefs offense. Mm-hmm. Once they can get 1 or 2, and once they get Kelsey going, and you don't really know where Patrick is throwing to it, now you add Juju back into the mix. I am eager to see Juju maybe taking on that what would have been a Rice-Hopkins role, and what does that mean for Hopkins on the outside? Now Hopkins might be drawing attention on the outside. What does that mean for Xavier Worthy? Maybe getting the second cornerback in coverage, and does that open up shots down the field where you finally see that connection where it has seemed like Mahomes and Worthy ever since earlier in the year have been trying to pound down this door, like will eventually it jam open in this game when finally you're starting to get some complementary weapons back.
Now, I think you can probably speak to how big this game is going to be, not just for Chiefs-Bills, but for the NFL. I mean, all eyeballs will be on it. Is this the best rivalry in the league right now, or is there another rivalry? I mean, we thought for a while
Yeah,
because of the
that's a good
hatred between the
question.
Chiefs and the Bengals, there's that player hatred. But this one, in terms of, I guess, the history between these two teams, the quarterbacks, the fan bases, there's a lot going into this rivalry. So right now, would you say this is the best rivalry in the NFL, or is it kind of a year-to-year thing where whoever the top
Yeah.
contender is to the Chiefs, that's the best rivalry?
Yeah, I think the best rivalry right now, aside from Nick Sirianni versus his own fans, is Kansas City versus the flavor of the moment. And for a few years, it was Buffalo. The Ravens had their minute or two intermixed. Then it became Cincinnati when it seemed like, okay, there's finally a joker to the Batman that is Patrick Mahomes. Cincinnati would probably have that analogy reversed. But yeah, no, I think it really is the Chiefs versus that next best team. And I wonder if, and I don't predict this scenario, but the NFL is weird. You never know what can happen. Like, let's say the Chiefs do go to Buffalo and win by 14. Now suddenly that kind of lessens, and you look at what's next, and you got Pittsburgh and Houston on the horizon.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the best rivalry in football right now is the Chiefs versus the top AFC opponent of the moment, and the stars are aligning this Sunday. So you do get the best rivalry, I think, in the game right now, yeah.
All right, real quickly, let's move on to our mailbag questions. And if you ever have thoughts, opinions, questions for Pete and I, just look for his tweet that he puts out every single day, the day of the show, or you can use our text line at 913-912-4810. That's 913-912-4810. Only 2 to go over tonight, but good thing we only got 5 minutes left in the
There we
show.
go.
So question number 1, do you honestly think they may look at another left tackle like Donovan Smith?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to remember that like Brett Veach is diligent. Like, and I think probably doesn't get enough credit for being like an executive of the year candidate. He's kind of could have gotten it for any of these years that have led up to this, and I think that is certainly a consideration. Now, is it imminent? I don't think so. I don't think right now. I think they're comfortable with what they have in Wanye. And we mentioned a potential backup plan where Tooney could kick out and maybe you end up putting another left guard in there. Now, you get down the road, and we had mentioned Doom's scenarios, which have been prevalent this year with Kansas City, where Morris goes down, maybe there's another injury. And, yeah, I think at a certain point, you break the glass. But I just don't think they're there yet. Are they looking at it? Sure. Are they considering it? Yeah, I think they have it in their back pocket, and we'll see if it ends up playing out that way. I know it is silly, but that GIF, I call them GIFs. People hate me for it. That GIF by Donovan Smith the other night, it's a joke, but I think it alludes to the fact that he'd be
willing.
Ready and willing if the price was right and he was ready to go, yeah.
Question number 2 here, two-parter. Number 1, how do we fix the Pat to Worthy connection that started so promising? And secondly, does Juju returning help that?
Yeah, I think the short answer is we have seen in back-to-back weeks that maybe we wouldn't be having this question.
Yeah.
If Xavier Worthy, they credited him for making a good move on the deep shot 2 weeks ago, ends up stepping out of bounds, a little bit of a rookie moment. Andy Reid and Pat, and even I talked to Xavier in the locker room. He acknowledged that and said, I'll be better the next time. And guess what? He was. He beat his man, and no other way to say it. Greatest quarterback of all time. Missed him. He missed him. And say they make that connection, that wouldn't have been the case. And so I think as you get these pieces back, even extends to Isaiah Pacheco, where now you have this 1-2 punch of Hunt and Pacheco, where maybe they're even a little bit better because they're fresh, right? They have fresher legs, theoretically. You get Juju back. And the more that you can take attention away from the deep ball, and you're worried about Hunt and Pacheco and stacking the box, or you're worried about, hell, what are Juju and Hopkins and Kelsey doing in the intermediate of the field, that's going to lend to closer action defensively to the line of scrimmage and then allow that 4-2, 4-3 speed to shine. And so, again, I think we're getting close. I think Mahomes and Worthy are batting down the door. I think we've seen some signs of that in the past 2 weeks of these deep shots paying off, and now it's just a matter of one of them hitting.
Now, with this running back room, I know that's going to be a lot of people's focus. You already touched on it a little bit with Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. But, when you look past this week, and maybe moving forward, is it the right move? Is it the smart decision to really ease Pacheco back in.
Yeah.
Where maybe it's you get to next week, Pacheco's 80%, and you say, no, it's just going to be Kareem Hunt with his 24, 25 carries, and let's wait closer to the postseason. Why don't we?
That's the beauty of this team and what they do. Like, Juju goes down, and after that first week, you thought, okay, the Chiefs are going to be fine with Juju. And they lost Juju. They bring in Hopkins. And now you get Juju back in the mix, and you just have depth. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any sliver of the Chiefs athletic training staff. It's hard to just speak for them. We never really get an opportunity to talk with them. But I don't think they would ever rush Pacheco back in. And why do they not have to? Well, Carson Steele isn't your running back one. You brought Kareem Hunt back, which looks like the acquisition of the year across the NFL. That includes Hopkins. Even no matter what he ends up doing, I tend to think his role is going to grow and grow every week. But, regardless of what happens and the rest of the year plays out, and even regardless of if Pacheco comes back and is a world beater, Hunt filled that position for you and did it in a big way when you needed it. And it kept the Chiefs afloat. It kept them winning every week. And I just think, and I asked Hunt about this today at the podium, I said, is it going to remind you of your time in Cleveland with Nick Chubb? And he admitted, yeah, it's going to be similar. And that was a pretty good running back tandem that gave a lot of defensive coordinators fits.
All right, great stuff as always, Pete. That'll do it for another edition of Arrowhead Pride Radio on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. That's Pete Sweeney, Caden Spruill, and Kyle Collier produced this thing.
Yeah, thank you for listening to Arrowhead Pride Radio, brought to you by Heartland Financial and Mortgage. Putting people first. Check them out at hfmkc.com.
Chiefs Bills this Sunday, 3:25. Buffalo, a 2.5-point favorite. We'll have a recap of it next week, so you take it easy, Kansas City.
This has been another edition of Arrowhead Pride Radio. For much more, head to arrowheadpride.com and follow at Arrowhead Pride on social media.